January is a month where I try to do a lot of reflecting. Okay, so how did the previous year go? What were some things that I thought I would do in the previous year? So in 2025, what were some things that I thought that I would do with for myself, with my family, in my job? And then based on what maybe I didn't get done or what I did get done, then I make plans for what do I want to do this year? What do I want to be different? How do I want to grow? And as I get older, the hope is we are getting wiser. But as I get older, I found that my focus has changed. All the things that I used to think were important, they aren't so important. It doesn't matter if I have a perfect house. It doesn't matter if I have, everything organized. It doesn't matter if I have tons and tons of friends. What really matters is the quality of my relationships. Am I changing and growing and working towards physical and emotional and spiritual health? And, really as a mom, how am I connecting with my family and my kids? Those are things that are important. As I've gotten older and learned and looked at different resources and sat in and listened to other experts and done a lot of reading, I've really grown in the area of what's called locus of control. So that's what we will talk about tonight as I'm really looking at my life and the things that are bringing me joy or the things that are bringing me stress. How can I look at that in a realistic, practical way so that I spend my emotional energy and my time on things that I actually can have an impact on? Because a lot of times we will spend our emotional energy and our time on things that don't really matter or that we can't change at all. So, um, I have lots of different roles. So I'm a teacher. I teach parenting classes for Oklahoma Family Network. I teach parenting classes for Family and Children Services, a local mental health agency here in town. And then I often will teach parenting classes for my at my school. I'm a school counselor, so I work at Jenks East Elementary. Absolutely love working with the age I work with, third and fourth graders, because I feel like they're still open to hearing what you have to say. They still make me feel like I'm cool. So I don't know if I taught middle school or high school if they would think I was cool. I know they'd all be taller than me, but I don't know if they think I was cool. But I just feel like I can have such an impact on shaping good common sense and awareness about the brain and mental health and coping skills with my third and fourth graders that I work with. I'm a wife, so I've been married now for 16 and a half years, remarried. So I've also navigated through, blended family and all these different dynamics that are important. I'm a mom. I'm the mom of four, and I still have one left at home. So she is at 15 and a half. So she is only with us for 3.5 more years before she goes off to college. Her plans are to go to college. So my time with her is incredibly valuable. That is definitely shaping how I'm looking ahead and what I want to plan. I'm a sister. I have a sister who lives long distance, and I want to continue to build that relationship. And we are working in partnership, helping care for our elderly parents. My dad in memory care, and my mom currently lives with me, navigating all those things. I'm a daughter, working with my mom and redefining and working through our relationship now that my mom lives with us. And I'm a friend. These are all important parts of my life. And so as I look ahead to the year ahead, I want to make sure that the areas that I'm focusing on, these important things that make me me, how am I going to continue to grow in these areas and manage all the stress and things that come along with all these different roles. So hopefully you will, learn some of the things that I've learned. So we have several things that we want to talk about tonight. And I do want to mention if you just joined, if you are needing translation services, because we do have Alberto who is available. He's translating in Spanish. If you're needing translation services, please look in the chat section and you will see instructions on how to access that translation. So, all right. We are going to talk tonight. I gave my introduction. We're going to talk about what's in your circle, this idea of locus of control. That'll make sense to you here in a little bit. We're going to talk about how can we make adjustments on where we're putting our focus and our time and our energy. we're going to talk just a little bit about mindful moments, how you can work in moments of mindfulness, moments of those kind of coping skills that will help you manage stress no matter what season of life you are in, and then wrap that up too. So here's my goal tonight. I want you to help find peace in your chaos. All of us have different seasons. I would say that last year was probably one of the most difficult years that I've had in a very long time, and it was instant. Took my parents to their annual checkup, and from annual checkup, admitted my mom to the hospital, and then had to navigate being an instant caregiver for someone with dementia and, dialysis and, hospice and all these things. And it was absolute chaos. And there was no planning for it. It was completely unexpected and happened overnight. Even in the midst of that complete disruption and very stressful time, I was still able to find peace of what I chose to focus on. These skills really showed up for me, and I was so, so grateful for that. Um, so, um, that is what I'm hoping that you guys can do. It doesn't matter what season of life you're in. These strategies can help you find calm. So first, let's kind of focus on what's in your circle and what I mean by that. All right, so I want you to take a minute to either write down, like on a piece of paper next to you, or maybe on your phone, make a little note of what are the different things in your life right now that worry you, that you are stressed out about, that take up so much of your time. What are those things? Try to write down at least five or think of at least five because we want to take some time to think about our biggest stressors and where does that fall in this idea of locus of control. All right, so take a minute, write those things down. Um, if you're comfortable, you could also put those in the chat section because I'm always curious about what are your stressors and how often they're so similar to mine. So just take a minute. And if it's easier for you to just write it in the chat section, you can do that too. All right. So I'm going to put mine in the chat section. Uh,
In the chat, someone mentioned the you, Lauren, speak very fast.
okay.
And well, can you just go down a little
Slow
bit,
down.
please?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And
I'm so sorry.
don't be sorry. And then is Monica with Alberto for translation services too?
Yeah, well, she said Alberto is a little bit delayed because you
Okay.
speak too
Very good. You
fast.
bet. I will slow down.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
thank
Because
you.
that is something in my control. I can do that. All
Thank you,
right.
Lauren.
You're welcome. Thank you, Nancy. I'm going to give you guys 30 more seconds. Write down different things in your life that you worry about or get stressed out about. And thank you, Cassie, for sharing yours. That's a tough one. All right. Hopefully, you've had a minute to kind of write those things down. I know for me, I put my daughter's schedule. So she's a band, she's in a lot of different things. We are thinking ahead to what her schedule will be for next year. I forgot to put my daughter will be driving soon. My mom lives at home with us now. My dad is in memory care, so balancing that balancing work and home life. So, to manage stress there and organizing the house. If any one of you has a miracle for cooking, let me know. One of you, Cassie, put finances, appointments, my own health, anxiety, and understanding autism itself. That is a very difficult, complex subject, autism. And I'm glad that you are connected to the Oklahoma Family Network because I love how they try to connect families who are struggling with similar things. Because I tell you what, parents, you are the best resources because you will find information and maybe you have the information that someone else needs. I love that. All right. Now, all of us have different things, but I would imagine that finances, schedules, your own health and anxiety, um, any specific conditions that you or your family members might have, all of those are very, very common stressors. So I don't want you to start out thinking, oh, great, thank you for reminding me of everything I'm stressed out about. There is, um, there's hope. All right. So I'm going to set those concerns aside. And now I want you to look at how we're going to filter that information. Okay. Um, oh, I see. I see work. Um, Personal problems, migration situations, immigration situations. I imagine that's a huge stress for a lot of people. Learning a new position, grandchildren, moving, health and retirement. Retirement seems so far away, but you have to plan for it now. Those are all very real, very significant concerns. Now, there is a school of thought called that talks about locus of control. So within locus of control, there are different areas of our life. So first off, there is that this back area are things that are going on in other people's lives that are not a concern at all for me. So there's plenty of things that, someone else might not put retirement on their list of concerns because that's just not an issue for them right now. All right. Then there's also something called the circle of concern. That is this gray area. Um, and in the circle of concern, those are things that cause you concern. They impact your life, but you have no control over those. These are situations, problems, issues that while they do, you worry about them. There's literally nothing you can personally do that will change those things. All right. So that's the circle of concern. The circle of influence, these are all the circumstances, the issues, the problems that we have indirect control over, meaning I might be able to do some things in my life that will influence that might make things better or make things worse, but I don't have complete control over that. I can make a positive or a negative impact if I change a few things in my life or do a few things, but I still can't control that. So that would be the circle of influence. I have some options for making a difference, but I can't totally control that. And then I have the circle of control. These are the circumstances, the issues, and the problems that I have direct control over. I can decide, and if I decide to do something, it will make an absolute difference in that situation. Now, I want you to notice all of these things cause me to worry. They impact my life. I do not have control over all of these things. Some of them in the circle of concern, I have no control over. They still make a big difference in my life. I have no control. Some in the circle of influence, I can influence things, but I can't change them ultimately. And in the circle of control, I can change those things. I can do those things. So let's kind of give you some examples of what this might be. All right, this outside gray area, circle of concern. These are the things that impact your life, but you have zero control over them. All right. So your past decisions, choices, and behavior. Can you go back and change them? Nope. They're already done. Now they have an impact on your life, but I cannot change that. I cannot change the decisions that I've made in the past. I might wish that I could, but I can't. If public transportation is on time, that's not a big issue in Oklahoma unless you're using an Uber or something like that. But that's a big issue for my son who lives in Boston. The outcome of a court case. There are a lot of court cases that I can't control. There are cases before the Supreme Court right now that might have an impact on the things I care about, but I can't control what they decide. A sports match, I can't control who wins or loses. The media, I can't control what they're saying on the media or, how they're saying it. How much stock a real retailer has. I can't control if I go to Walmart in a snowstorm and they have chicken or they don't have chicken for me to buy. Can't control that. A celebrity's behavior or opinions. I can't control that. Strangers' comments on social media. I can't control that. Cyber threats, someone else's behavior or driving habits. I can't control that. How often do we rage about other people's driving? I literally don't know that person and I cannot control how they're driving. The economy and prices. I can't control that. Traffic. If you live in Oklahoma, we complain about our traffic, but then just go to Dallas for a little bit and I don't complain about traffic usually when I come back from Dallas. We have no traffic compared to Dallas. Where you were born, can't control that. A death, if there's a death in the family or a death of a loved one or a death of a beloved pet, I cannot control that. Government policies, I can't decide. I can't control those things. The threat of war or world peace, that is out of my control. And the weather. We all understand the weather this week with the snowstorm that we've had, and I can't control that school got canceled because of the weather. Now, all of these things are important things that have an impact on your life. But remember, I cannot change those things at all. That's the circle of concern. This blue area, this is called the circle of influence. That means if I do a few things that are in my control, it might have an impact in this area. So, for example, other people's actions. I cannot control their actions. However, I can do things like set up healthy boundaries that protect me from some of their negative actions. As a parent, I could have some good structures and discipline strategies that will help influence my daughter or my children to make good decisions. So I can't control their actions, but I might be able to influence their actions. I cannot control other people's choices. But I say this all the time, especially to parents. If I have good communication skills as a parent, I can really influence my children's choices. As a school counselor, if I really do a good job at my job and I make connections with children and with teachers and I'm really help in that area, I might influence a child's choices. Maybe one day they get in a fight, and based on how I interact with them, maybe the next day they slow down before they get in a fight. So I might have some influence there. Whether or not people like me, I can't control if they like me, but there are things I can do that make me more likable. Absolutely. If I'm kind to others, maybe they'll like me more. If I am thoughtful and helpful, if people can count on me, yeah, they might like me more. If I am mean and rude and harsh and say one thing to them and do another, that might make them not like me. All right. My children's future. And that's hard for me in that my daughter, 3.5 more years at our house. My sons are all in their 20s and they all live on their own and have their own jobs and their own schooling. I can't control their future, but I have an influence on that. The different things we talk about and the things I put in place as a parent, I can influence that. Where I work, sometimes we just have to. I live in Oklahoma. I have to get a job in Oklahoma. Maybe someone's hiring, maybe someone's not. So I have some influence on where I work if I choose to go find a different job, but ultimately I don't have control over that. Who I vote for. Well, I can decide who I vote for, but I can't decide who is on the ballot. How much my partner loves me. I can't control that. But definitely my behavior and my choices can have a positive or negative influence on the quality of our relationship. Whether or not I get promoted, I can't control that. But if I am reliable and do a good job, I increase the chances I might get promoted. My reputation. People can say anything about me, what they want, but if I behave in a consistent, honorable way, that will have an influence on my reputation. Who follows me on social media? I can't control that, but I can also control whether or not I even have social media. My commitments. There are some things in our lives that we can't get away from. One of you mentioned, understanding and learning about autism. So if you have a family member or yourself who is impacted by autism, you can't control some of the commitments around that, like the doctor's appointments and, meeting with different people at school and reading and all those kinds of things. Some of those things in our lives are the obligations that we have, but I can get picky about what I commit to. I have some influence there. Other people's thoughts, again, I cannot control their thoughts, but with good, effective communication, I can influence their thoughts. So, again, this blue area, these are things that I don't have complete control over, but my choices and my behavior and my actions can have a positive, a negative, or a neutral influence in that area. That's why it's called the circle of influence. And then we have the circle of control. What do I actually have control over? My thoughts, my words, my actions and behavior, my reactions. Again, I can't control how someone else treats me, but I can manage my reaction to that, my decisions and choices, my attitude and mindset. I can wake up and I can choose to have a positive attitude and do things that build the feeling of gratitude in my life, or I can wake up and say, I don't like today and choose to be in a mood all day. My mood, and my work ethic, how much I get done. Now, as a school counselor, I could make a list and have all sorts of ideas about things that I'm planning on getting done today. I might not be able to get all those things done, but I have a choice about whether or not I even make a list to help me get things done and follow through. So that is my actual circle of control. All right. Every single one of these layers, the gray area, circle of concern, the blue area, circle of influence, the white area, circle of control. Every single one of these areas, it has an impact on my life. I'm not telling you, oh, just ignore it. All of these things affect me. But what am I focusing on? You might be surprised. You might be focusing on a lot of things that are completely out of your control. So now look at that list of things that you wrote down, the things that you are stressed out about, that you worry about, that are frustrating for you. And some of you in the chat section, you put learning a new position, my grandchildren, moving, health, retirement, work, personal problems, finances, appointments, anxiety, understanding autism. I put my daughter's schedule, my mom living at home with me, my dad in memory care, balancing work and home. These are all concerns in our life. Where do those fall? So look at your list. Would finances, would that fall under circle of concern, circle of influence, circle of control? So take a minute to look at that. And I'm going to go back to this explanation. Does it fall under circle of concern? You have no control over it. Circle of influence, you have some influence over it. Circle of control. Yep, you have direct control over this. Think about it for a minute. Where do yours fall? Okay. I'm going to give you just a minute to think about that. Okay. All right. For example, let me filter this for you. All right. The topic of finances, one of you listed that was an area of concern. All right. So finances, that would fall under circle of influence because I can't necessarily control how wealthy I am or how much money I have. I'm a teacher. I don't make a lot of money. However, I do have some influence on how I budget, what I choose to spend my money on. I have some influence over that. And then part of that is also within my direct control. I can decide if I'm going to spend the money on something. That is completely a choice of mine. I can decide if I'm going to take the time to work out a budget. I can decide if I'm going to plan ahead and take a certain amount of money out and put it in retirement or things like that. So part of that is in my control, and part of that is in my circle of influence, where I could make a few behavior changes. I could, choose to take a few things out that I'm spending money on. So that's kind of a little bit of both. Appointments. Now, that is under some circle of concern. You can't control if you have to have an appointment necessarily. And that also falls under circle of influence because you can schedule appointments in a way that spreading them out, you could possibly do that. And some of that falls directly under your control because you can choose whether or not to make an appointment or not. If it's the right time or not the right time for that. Anxiety. Now, some of that falls under, that would usually fall under circle of influence because anxiety, like some people have high blood pressure, some people have type 2 diabetes. There are some conditions that we have. Someone who struggles with anxiety, that is a state of the brain. And there's a great class we offered that I'd like to offer again soon. I was going to talk to Erin about that. Parenting the anxious child. Anxiety is a state of the brain. So my brain might be wired to be more anxious. I have 4 children. One of my son's brains, he has always been my worrier, my one who would be nervous about things, who would be concerned. One of my sons is like, sure, let's try it. One of my sons, that was not him at all. Now, he can't control how his brain is wired, but he can definitely make a lot of choices about how he chooses to spend his time, if he gets enough sleep, those kinds of things. So some of it is in his area of influence, and some of it is directly in his control, especially his reactions. So hopefully, just me talking about a few of those examples that you gave can help you understand something. Now, one person did put migration issues, like immigration issues. I'm translating that. There are some things that I have no control over right now, what current immigration policy is, or what current things are being done for immigration. I don't have control over that. However, some areas that I do have control over is how am I managing my stress about that? Sometimes we can even control how much TV am I watching? If I am watching 10 hours a day, updates on how things are going, and that's causing me stress to a level that I can't ever not feel stress, I might have to limit how often a day I read something that has to do with that because I can't control it. So that might be a direct decision I could make about that. Also, my direct decision could be what do I choose to get involved in, whether that be for advocacy or political influence or writing my senators or whatever that might be. So while a big portion of that is completely out of our control, there are some things that are still in our control, especially my choices about what I choose to read, how I choose to manage my stress, how I choose to communicate, and who I choose to communicate with. All of those things are still within my control, even in that situation. So that's the goal of all of this. All right. So a lot of times we do not take any time to think about what am I stressing about? Where does that fall in the circle of control? And that is where we can really experience burnout. So, um, here is a great quote. When we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. That's what locus of control is about. It's not pretending that everything is okay. It is saying, all right, in this area that is causing me a great deal of stress, how can I change myself and my decisions and my choices and my behavior that's going to help me manage this situation that I can't change? In everything, we have a lot of options. When we constantly focus on things we can't change instead of focusing on things we can change, that's where the stress comes from. That's where the feeling overwhelmed comes from because we're focusing on things that we can't change. instead of focusing on things we can change within ourselves about that situation. And you're right. One of you mentioned in the comments, self is the only thing that we can control. And that it takes a long time to realize that. All right. So I just had you guys do an exercise where you wrote down the things that cause you stress. And then we talked about the circle of control, the circle of concern, the circle of influence. How can you teach this to kids? This year, my, oh gosh, he's 24. Yeah, just turned 24. Well, he's 24 and a half now. My 24-year-old, you just never know what they are listening to. All the things that you say as a parent, you just never know. And two times this year, he started a new job last April. And when he got down there to the new job, he works for 2 weeks straight and then he's off for 2 weeks. But those 2 weeks that he works, he's working 12, 13, 14, 15, 16-hour days sometimes for 2 weeks in a row, like every day, 2 weeks in a row. So 14 days he is at least a 12-hour day. Um, and when he started, there were some people that he was working with that complained about everything. I mean, they complained about we don't have parts, and they complained about they're not working as hard as I am, and I don't like. So they were often in a bad mood because they were complaining. And my son tells me, he goes, Mom, I just told them, hey, what's in my control and what's out of my control? You know what I can control? My attitude, how hard I am working today, whether or not I order the parts. And if the parts don't come in, that's out of my control. So I'm not going to stress about it because me worrying about it is not going to make the part get here any faster. So I'm not going to complain about that because that complaining ruins my day. And he was literally, what's in my control? What's out of my control? What's in my control? What's out of my control? And what's been beautiful to watch is this 24-year-old who most of the people that he is working with are in their mid 30s and some of them in their mid 40s, how his attitude has changed the whole attitude of his work group. So he was teaching people who were in this habit of complaining and staying stressed and upset and just putting all this emotion and anger into things they literally had no control over. They had no control over whether this person in the parts department got them their thing faster or not. No control. And then they would complain about it and be stressed out and then kind of ruin the whole mood of the shift. But he's been listening to me over the years. What's in my control? What's out of my control? And when you see that and you see them applying it in their lives, I mean, that was like a giant Christmas present for me. So, how could you teach this to your kids? Well, one thing you might consider doing is having weekly meetings where you talk through, all right, guys, what do we have coming up this week? What are some things that have been bothering you? Sometimes having a weekly meeting, besides just talking to your kids when they want to talk about stuff, but having a weekly meeting is kind of almost like a staff meeting at work, or we're going to sit down, let's talk about what's coming up this week, make some plans, and it opens up the table, the conversation to talk about things that are a problem or struggles. Then I've even seen in a parenting workshop I went to that sometimes for younger children, having a visual aid, not just me talking about it with words, but doing something with action. So they put a hula hoop, which is like, the big circle hula hoop. Or you could even just have, a towel or a ruler on the floor. And one side, it's in my control. The other side is out of my control. But to go with this circle of control, they used a hula hoop. And in the workshop, you would ask the kids, okay, someone in class is in a bad mood, in my control or out of my control? And the kids would step in or out of the hula hoop. If it was in their control, they would step inside the hula hoop. If that situation was out of their control, they would step out of the hula hoop. That visual might be a great way for your kids to think about it. All right, someone was mean to me on the bus, in my control, out of my control. Um, I got mad on the bus and yelled at someone. Well, that's in my control. That's my attitude and my choice. Someone was mean to me on the bus. That's out of my control. I can't prevent that from happening, but I can control my reaction to that. So doing that kind of talking through a scenario and physically moving our body in my control, out of my control, that could be a great thing for kids because kids, especially younger kids, cannot, it's abstract. It's not a visual thing for them to think is that in my control or out of my control. Sometimes physically moving their body helps them. Now, the older your child is, obviously, the more they can just understand the concept. And using phrases all the time, like, is this in your circle of control? As a regular feedback tool. As they're talking to you about something or complaining something and you respond with empathy, then have that question, hey, is this in your circle of control? And then talk about how you are using these strategies in your own life. What are you adjusting? I often talk out loud as a parent. You know what? That is not in my control. I am not going to spend my day worrying and stressing about that. I'll say it out loud because I want the children in my life to hear it. And I want them to see how their mom or their coworker or their school counselor is using this information in my own life. So these are ways you can teach your kids these issues too. Okay. All right. Now, here's where we can start to make adjustments. You listed the things that you were concerned about that were causing you stress. All right. You took a minute to decide, you know what? Where is this going? Is this something I have control over? Is this something I have influence over? Or is this something I have no control over? We have to often take the time to think about that because here's what happens. If we focus all of our concern if we focus on all of our concerns, we can feel out of control and helpless. If we put our time and energy into our circle of influence, that blue area where I can make an impact, or our circle of control, that's when I feel more empowered, energized, and peaceful. If I am only focusing on that gray area, the things that are impacting my life that I have no control over, I am going to feel out of control and helpless. I have to admit, if I watch too much news, you know, I need to watch the news because I need to know what's going on. But currently, if I watch too much news and I see all these things that are going on, and that's all I'm thinking about is I feel out of control and helpless, out of control and helpless. But if I then choose to adjust my focus, all right, in this situation, what can I influence? What can I actually control? If I choose to spend my time and my energy there, I'm going to feel more empowered, energized, more at peace. I'm not going to feel out of control and helpless. All right, another important part as we are making adjustments. When we cannot change our circumstances, there is no point in investing time and energy trying to do that. And we do that a lot with other people. When I cannot change this other person, when I cannot change this other person's behavior or their attitude, there is no point investing time and energy trying to do that. Even with things we can't change, I can still make adjustments that bring me peace. There's another class that we did, Oklahoma Family Network, called, it was about boundaries. And we did that last year. Yeah, we did it last year. And it was using the book, The Let Them Theory. And in it, it talks about how it's a really great book about boundaries. Hey, if I can't control that, why am I spending all my time? Even in a situation where I can't control it, I can absolutely make adjustments for my peace. Um, I can't control that my mom is living with me right now. And I'm grateful that we are able to have her live with us and we have the capacity to have her live with us. I can't control her health. I can't control if she's going to be here next month or the month after. I can't control those things. If that's all I think about is my mom's health and, oh, what's going to happen next or her kidney's okay, I'm going to be helpless and hopeless. What can I do to bring me peace? I can have connecting time with her. I can make sure I'm getting enough sleep so that I can manage stress better. I can make sure that I am talking to her not every single day, but at set times of the week about, all right, what appointments do we need to do? Because if I talk about it all the time, that might be too stressful. So even in situations that I can't control, I can still make adjustments to bring me peace. Make adjustments where they count. What really counts is changing our behavior and our thinking or changing how we influence people. Sometimes that might be learning different skills. If you are really struggling with your kids and their behavior, What if you took a parenting class or read a book or, look at back at some of the videos we have on Oklahoma Family Network YouTube page. That could be something great. If I'm really struggling with my behavior or thinking, maybe I could see a therapist to really undo some of that toxic thinking. Maybe I could read a book that would be helpful. Maybe I could set up having lunch with a friend once a week or once every 2 weeks to really have a set time to kind of talk things through. I mean, these are all things that I have control over and change our attitudes towards the problems that we have no control over. I can't control it. Giving up the right to control it is huge. Learning to accept problems and live with them, even if we don't like it. It's not fair, but it is what it is. I remember hearing a great story. It was someone who was really, really frustrated with the relationship she had with her mother. And it was in a group setting. And then the group facilitator asked, okay, let me ask you a question. If someone didn't have arms, would you ask them to give you a hug? And they're like, no, of course not. If they don't have arms, they can't give me a hug. And the group facilitator said, your mom doesn't have arms. And everyone just kind of stopped. Your mom doesn't have arms. This person was desperate for love and affection and tenderness and kind of that mothering. And the mom was not capable of doing that because the mom had so much of her own trauma and her own things that she was dealing with. She couldn't offer that unless she got help herself. So giving up the need to be mothered and realizing my mom's a human being and can't do that right now. That you have no control over that. It isn't fair if other people have, a parent who is involved in their life in a way that we wish our parent could be involved in my life. But that was like such a profound statement in that group setting that impacted a lot of people. Sometimes if we look at a situation and realize, hey, maybe I am expecting something of someone that they're not able to give. When I can accept that, even when it's not fair, that acceptance, that attitude adjustment, that brings me peace without even ever having to change that other person. So, as you are looking at the things that are causing you stress in your life, the things you worry about, the how you spend your time, where is that falling in your circle of control? Is it totally out of your control? Could you have some influence, especially if you learned some different skills or did things in a different way? And is it in your control? And take responsibility for the things that are in your control. Because you know what? We really stay stuck when we want to blame it on everyone else. Oh, well, if they would just change, everything would be fine. Guess what? You can be fine even if they never change. If you make some changes in you for managing stress, for what you choose to focus on. So, and again, I'm not denying that things are hard. It's what are you focusing on? So here are ways you can start to take charge of your circle. I see a message in the chat section. Let's see. Um, uh, oh, I like that. There's an actual website. This is in the chat section of grown individuals who feel like they didn't get mothered and nurtured, and sometimes they even dress up in like role play being mothered and nurtured. Um, there's a real need for that. If you didn't get that mothering and nurturing, sometimes seeing a therapist and really working through some of those really core human issues, it's painful, but it's beautiful. It's 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 healing is I wish there were things that we didn't have to heal from. I wish we never had to heal, that everything was okay. But man, that struggle, you learn so much about yourself. And truly, I mean, I often feel like you come out stronger on the other side. So now, where are some practical ways that I can make a difference in how I'm managing my circle, my life? Expectations. Expectations are directly linked to feelings of happiness. Adjust where they're needed. For example, if I have the expectation that my house is going to be perfectly clean all the time, and then my reality is my house is not perfectly clean all the time, I'm going to be very disappointed and unhappy. So let's take a minute to look at the expectation. Is that expectation realistic? I'm a working mom with a child and a corgi who sheds so much hair. I wish I could start a business just gathering the piles of hair he has. So, is my expectation realistic? That expectation for me, not realistic. So, if I keep the unrealistic expectation, I will continue to be unhappy. If I adjust the expectation and help it become realistic, I will be more happy. My house might not be perfectly clean, but I'm not going to be constantly sad that my house isn't perfectly clean because my expectation is realistic. Another thing to look at with expectations are, is it spoken? Have you actually told other people your expectation? So if you have an expectation that someone is going to help with the dishes, am I expecting them to read my mind? Or if I shared, hey, I want to talk through who does what. How are we working together as a family to get the chores done? I'm frustrated because I feel like I'm the one doing most of the chores. Let's sit and talk about, who is doing what. If I've never spoken my expectation and I expect them to read my mind, and then I am angry with them when they don't read my mind, then you're going to be disappointed. If I have not been clear with my children about my expectations for their behavior or how they use their cell phone, and then they don't use their cell phone in a way that I feel they should have used their cell phone because they should just know, have I clearly communicated my expectation? If you haven't, you know, get better at clearly communicating your expectations. So they need to be realistic, they need to be spoken. Okay. Logistics. Logistics, I can make adjustments there. You've got to be picky about your schedule. Simplify wherever you can. And sometimes that's letting go of other people's expectations of us. Plan for how it works for your specific needs. You don't have to say yes to everything. Absolutely do not have to say yes to everything. Be picky about your schedule. You are going to go through seasons of life where you will feel overwhelmed. Be picky about your schedule. It's very, very important. Support, connect to your village. Know where you can actually find helpful support. Sometimes you might find that you have a friend that whenever you go and you talk to this friend for support, you actually leave more worked up, angrier, more frustrated. I know, gosh, it's been, how long has that been? Since five. So 20, like 22 years ago, when I was going through the end of my first marriage, there were some friends that I would talk to them about some of the frustrating things that were going on. By the time I would finish with that conversation, man, I was ready to go start a war. You know, it didn't calm me down. It made me angrier, but I felt justified in my anger. And yeah, I'm going to do this and I'm going to get him back. And it did not help me. So there were certain friends that I had to pull back from and not spend as much time with them at that time in my life because spending time with them brought out the kind of emotions that weren't helpful for me, that weren't bringing me peace, that weren't helping me figure out better communication and grace and forgiveness and boundaries and those kinds of things. It was just all anger. So make sure you're finding helpful support. I will say that Oklahoma Family Network, great, great place for support. Specifically, there are lots of different resources, but if you are have specific struggles in your life, especially if it's a child or a family member with a physical or behavioral or emotional um, issue, they try to connect you to other families that might have a similar issue. So you're finding your network. So find that good, positive support. And that can be helpful. Sometimes support is a therapist if you really need someone neutral to talk to. Because sometimes we want our friends or we want our partner to have the skills of a therapist and they don't. I mean, they don't know what to do. And that can be really helpful, especially with all the online resources they have for counseling as well. Mindfulness. Mindfulness it's the ability to manage uncomfortable feelings and happy, peaceful feelings because I'm not focusing on escape. I have the coping skills to manage those feelings right here, right now, no matter what's happening. When you practice mindfulness, it's like exercise for your brain and your emotions. You're building new pathways in your brain. So if I take moments every day for box breathing or deep breathing or some of these other strategies that are helpfully known for stress management, I'm literally building a highway in my brain. The next time I feel stressed, I already know how to use this breathing technique. So my brain can get from stressed out to calm a lot faster because I already have practiced doing that. So mindfulness isn't just like an emergency thing like a band-aid. This is a way of life that gets your brain, it knows what to do on how to get to calm, no matter what happens to me during the day. And these are great skills to teach your children too. And then another one is joy. Choose things that bring you joy without the guilt. There's even that whole Marie Kumo, I forget the exact name of it, where you are cleaning and organizing your house and you take out every piece of clothing and you put it on the bed when you're cleaning out your closet and you literally look at it and think, does this bring me joy? No. I just cleared out three bookshelves full of counseling books that I'm never going to use because I'm not a therapist anymore. I'm a school counselor and I'm going to focus on parenting classes. But I held on to all these things thinking one day I might use it, one day I'm no. Does all that clutter and having to dust that stuff bring me joy? Nope. If I wind up needing to use that someday, then I will buy it someday. But I'm not going to keep holding on to things that I'm not using. Forget this should. Well, you should like this or you should like that. Forget should. What brings you joy? What doesn't bring you joy? Now, there are some things in life we still have to do, our obligations. But what brings you joy? What doesn't bring you joy? And I like how one of you put it, be intentional. So, any one of these areas, there is no way that you can change overnight. What if you started small? What if you thought about some of the things that are making you angry or frustrated at home? Then take a moment and think, all right, is that an expectation? How could I adjust my expectation for that in a way that is realistic and it's spoken? What if you just started in one area? What if you started in I'm going to work in one mindfulness thing a day. What if you started in one area? Any little change that you make is going to influence the system of your life because all of this interacts. If you have a frustrating family system right now, any changes you make within you yourself, it's going to influence the system. That does not mean it's going to change people in your system. What it means is it's going to change how you choose to interact with the people in your system, how you choose to manage your emotions around the people in your system. And that is going to change your system. Now, it takes time. One way I heard about it, a lot of people have a hard time making these changes. In one of my grad school classes, family systems theory, he talked about how a family system is like being in a boat. And if you start to change anything in that family system, even if that family system is dysfunctional, it is not a healthy family system. As soon as you start to make changes in yourself, it rocks the boat. It's causing a change. Even if the change ultimately is for good, it's rocking the boats. People are uncomfortable when the boat is rocked. And so many people are so uncomfortable that they just stop rocking the boat because they'd rather just keep doing things the way they've always done them because they can't handle the tension, the frustration of rocking the boat. But if you can endure that change, eventually the boat will settle and be going a different direction. So if you can endure the other people not liking the change because they're used to things being the way they are, you can settle and actually have your boat going in a different direction. Even if it's just a little bit different, that could be good. All right. So couple of other things. I'm going to actually, since we are don't have time to watch this, this is going to be a video that will be in the email that Erin will send to you that has the presentation, but it's from Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And it's a really good way to look at how you set up your weekly schedule. So we've got this great visual called big rocks and little rocks. Big rocks are the actual important things in our lives. And how can we make a schedule for that for the week? Little rocks are the things that take up our time that if we aren't intentional, like one of you said in the chat section, then we can wind up filling our week with all the things that aren't super important and then not have time for the things that are important. But he has a great visual. This is actually a visual that I've been using in my guidance lessons with my third and fourth graders at school as we talk about habit three, putting first things first, having a plan for our time is a really powerful thing. So that link to that video will be um, in the chat section. So this is the other thing that I think is helpful. As you are working through these things, your expectations, your logistics, your support, how you've worked mindfulness into your life, how you've chosen joy. If you have books or a website or something that you've done, feel free to share that in the chat section and also share that with your circle of influence. Share that with whoever you choose to have as a part of your support. Okay. And when it comes to mindfulness, I'm going to share a quick story because sometimes people think, well, all of a sudden I have to become like a yoga master and, be able to do all these things for me to be good at mindfulness. Little tiny things make a difference. And you will be getting in your email a bunch of extra handouts on simple, practical ways to work mindfulness into your daily routine and into your kids' daily routine if you are working with children. It can only take a minute. So here's an example. I have a family member, he works with, now he's a director of a big mental health program, but he was counseling drug and alcohol clients that were struggling with drugs and alcohol and working through addictions. And he was having a hard time kind of letting things go before he got home, taking the stress of the day home. And he would always tell his clients, okay, you've got to stay grounded. You've got to stay in the here and the now. Those are beautiful things to say. He had gotten out of the habit of doing that. So he's like, you know what? I've been feeling extra stress. I'm going to apply this in my life. So he set his watch to beep every hour, 1 hour before work, during the workday, 1 hour after work. So the watch would beep. And in that, when it would beep, it would be his reminder, and he would just take a minute to do a take five. Find something he could see, hear, smell, taste, touch. So a take five for me right now is I can see the color of the walls. I can smell the plants in the background. I can feel my feet on the floor. I can taste the Diet Coke in my mouth from earlier, and I can hear. I'm hearing, the sounds of birds outside. That by me making my brain to focus on what in this moment one thing I can see, hear, smell, taste, and touch. That pulls my brain into a different part of my brain, and it helps me reset. Because when we're anxious and worried, we're thinking about what could happen, what happened, what might happen. Our brain is in a different spot. When I force myself and I ground myself into what's happening right here and right now, that brings my brain to a place of calm because it trains your brain to do that. So literally, that took him 30 seconds, 8 times a day, 9, 10 times a day. Every hour on the hour, his watch beeped. He'd take 30 seconds to find hear, see, hear, smell, taste, touch. And he found himself feeling better within the week. Now, did any about his circumstances change? Nope. How he was choosing to manage his brain and helping it get back in the habit of coming back to calm, that made a difference for him. So you'll get some great handouts on that, including some links maybe to some other presentations we've done on mindful self-compassion that might be helpful with that. Okay. So here's kind of a little wrap up. Pay attention. Where are you spending time in your circle? Are you focusing on the things you have zero control over, no matter what you could do? Are you focusing on things in your sphere of influence and maybe making some improvements so you can increase your influence? And also giving up knowing what you can't influence? Or are you focusing on your circle of control? What are my behaviors, my choices, my mood, my actions, my decisions, my work ethic? What are you actually focusing on? Make those adjustments, change those attitudes and focus. Because remember, if I'm focusing on things that No matter how much I watch the news, I'm not going to be able to change that. I'm going to feel helpless and hopeless. When I shift my focus in any situation and bring it back to, all right, what do I actually have control over? That's going to make me feel empowered and create the opportunity for peace. Increase your influence. Advocate for things, look up resources, take some classes, read some books, have that kind of relationship. Build those relationships with friends or colleagues. Make adjustments, adjust expectations, make them realistic and spoken. Um, Set realistic schedules. You have to get picky. And you know what? Some people are going to be upset with you if you don't say yes to everything. Or am I going to choose to focus on their attitude about me? Or am I going to choose my peace? What really matters? And build your support systems. Again, highly recommend, working with Oklahoma Family Network or connecting to other resources that really can build your support so that you're not designed to deal with this all on your own. And mindful moments. Try to build in those tools by regularly doing some mindfulness activities. Teach it to everyone in the family. That will definitely help bring you back to calm. And remember, I can't control anyone else, but I can control myself, my actions, how I treat others, my boundaries, my choices, my effort, my thoughts, my values, my attitude, how I treat myself, how I react. If I remain focusing on these things, that is going to bring me peace, calm in the chaos, no matter what season of life that you are in. Oh, I love this. No is a full sentence. Saying no is sometimes loving yourself enough to say no. All right. Um, let's see here. Here are some resources too that will be included in the presentation. I did pull some great things from Stephen Covey, Seven Habits of Highly Effective People. Here's some links to some articles about Circle of Control. Also some links to the Oklahoma Family Network. They have a great website as well as a YouTube video. And we'll be having a class. I'll be teaching a class every month through May. And then some links to like Therapist Aid website that's got some great handouts and videos and things that are great for you and for your kids. All of that stuff will be included in the email. All right. So I do not have control over the time, but I have control over stop talking. So, Erin, that is all I have. And I'll let you wrap things up for us.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lauren. I told you guys you were in for a treat, and we appreciate you giving your time this evening for everybody. I know I learned everything. This is exactly what I needed after the stress of the change of schedules and everything. So I think that this worked out well and was perfect timing. So hopefully everybody took away some good nuggets, as I like to say, and hope you have a peaceful evening. And I'll be emailing everybody and with all of that information. And again, mark your calendars for March 27th for joining forces. And we'll see you hopefully February at our next presentation with Lauren. Thanks, guys. Have a great night.